people sit down at the same table. Same restaurant, same dish. One of them takes a bite and tastes something bright and fresh, citrusy, almost floral. The other one takes a bite and immediately reaches for their water because someone apparently rinsed the food in dish soap. Same herb, same plate, completely different experience. And here's the part that makes this genuinely strange. Neither of them is wrong. Their biology is just running a completely different program. Cilantro is one of the most divisive foods on the planet. Not in a spicy food way, where the difference is just about tolerance. In a way where the actual sensory signal traveling to the brain is different. One person is eating a garnish. The other person is eating something that tastes like it should unclog a drain. And that gap, that enormous, almost surreal gap between two people eating identical food, that's not a quirk. That's your DNA telling a story. Here's what's actually happening. Cilantro contains a family of chemical compounds called aldehydes. These are organic molecules found in a huge range of things, including the synthetic fragrances used in soaps, lotions, and cleaning products. So when you crush a cilantro leaf, you're releasing these aldehyde compounds into the air, and they travel up into your nose and bind to your odor receptors. For most people, those receptors interpret the signal as fresh, herby, pleasant. But for some people, those same molecules trigger a response that reads as overwhelmingly soapy, artificial, almost chemical. The compound hasn't changed. The perception has. And this is where it gets interesting because what you taste is not really what's on your tongue. Taste is mostly smell. The flavor of almost any food is assembled inside your brain from a combination of signals. Some from taste receptors? Yes, but a massive portion from your olfactory system, from the nose working in the background while you chew. When cilantro hits the back of your throat, volatile compounds travel up through a passage connecting your mouth and nose, and your odor receptors fire. What your brain interprets as flavor is really a construction, a story your nervous system is telling about what just entered your body. Change the olfactory input, and you change the entire experience of the food. So what changes the olfactory input? This is where your DNA steps in. Researchers looking into the cilantro phenomenon identified a specific genetic region near a cluster of odor receptor genes. And one gene in particular, OR6A2, codes for a receptor that appears to be especially sensitive to the aldehyde compounds in cilantro. People with certain variants of this gene seem to detect those soapy chemicals more intensely, more unavoidably. Their receptor is essentially tuned to that frequency in a way that other people's simply isn't. They're not imagining the soap taste. They're actually receiving a stronger or differently coded signal from the same stimulus. The herb is sending the same message. Their biology is decoding it differently. Now, here's what your genes don't do. They don't lock you in permanently. If you carry that OR6A2 variant, you're not sentenced to a lifetime of ruined tacos. Studies on taste and smell show consistently that repeated exposure can reshape perception. Your brain is constantly updating its predictions, and when you encounter a flavor enough times, especially in contexts you associate with pleasure or safety, the interpretation of that sensory signal can actually shift. Some people who grew up despising cilantro eventually learned to tolerate it, even enjoy it, after years of eating cuisines where it was central and unavoidable. Culture does something to the brain. Expectation does something to the brain. The genetic variant might set a baseline sensitivity, but your history, your associations, your environment, all of that is layered on top. Think about what that means. Two people at that same table, one loving the cilantro and one tasting soap, could share almost identical genomes and still have different experiences based entirely on where they grew up and what their kitchen smelled like as children. Or they could have the same background and completely opposite reactions because a single variation in a single gene is routing the signal through a different receptor. Biology and experience woven together so tightly it's almost impossible to separate them. The cilantro split is not about preference. It's not about being picky. It is a window into something far deeper. The chemical detection systems your ancestors built over millions of years, and the way your specific version of that system is encoded right now in every cell in your body. Your nose is not just smelling things. It's running threat assessments. It's scanning every molecule that enters your body and running it against an ancient database of what is useful, what is dangerous, and what is rotting. You have somewhere around 400 different types of odor receptors, and they didn't evolve so you could enjoy a good meal. They evolved so your ancestors could survive long enough to have you. Think about what odor receptors are actually doing. When a volatile chemical floats into your nasal cavity, it binds to a receptor, and that receptor fires a signal. Different receptors are tuned to different molecular shapes. Some catch the compounds released by spoiled meat. Some catch the smell of smoke. Some catch the particular chemical signatures of plants. And plants, as it turns out, are complicated. A plant can be medicinal, nutritious, toxic, or somewhere in between. And the only way to know, before you've swallowed it, is to smell it. Your olfactory system is the filter that stands between you and a bad decision that could kill you. It has been doing this job for a very long time. Here's what makes this fascinating when you bring it back to cilantro. The aldehydes in cilantro leaves belong to a broader class of compounds that appear naturally in a wide range of contexts. Plant material, animal fat, fermented substances. Some of those contexts across evolutionary history would have been genuinely valuable to detect. A sensitivity to these compounds might have helped someone notice that something was off, or that something was ripe, or that a particular plant in that particular environment warranted caution. The receptor that makes cilantro taste like soap to some people might have been, in a different time and a different landscape, a genuinely useful piece of biological equipment. The sensitivity didn't come from nowhere. It came from a world that rewarded it. And here's the part that really opens things up. Different populations, shaped by different environments, developed different receptor distributions. A community that evolved alongside one set of plants and animals would have different olfactory pressures than a community that evolved alongside a completely different ecosystem. So when you map cilantro aversion across populations, you don't see a random scatter. You see patterns that track, at least loosely, with ancestry. Cultures where cilantro has been a dietary staple for thousands of years tend to show lower rates of aversion. That's not just exposure, that's selection pressure. The populations that coexisted with these plants long enough have, on average, inherited receptor profiles that read the signal differently. Two people in the same household, from the same genetic background, might still have different experiences. Because the inheritance doesn't come as a package, it comes as a variation, shuffled and recombined with every generation. Which is also why the science here is more complicated than a single clean story. OR6A2 gets a lot of attention because it's the most cited candidate in this research, but the honest version of this is that the genetics of odor perception are not simple. Cilantro aversion almost certainly involves multiple receptors, multiple gene variants, and layers of interaction that researchers are still working through. If someone tells you there's one gene for hating cilantro, they're giving you the headline, not the paper. The reality is messier and more interesting, a trait shaped by many small differences across multiple loci, filtered through a lifetime of sensory experience, sitting at the intersection of inheritance and environment in a way that makes it genuinely hard to untangle, and that complexity is actually the point. Your reaction to a single herb in a taco is the output of a system that was designed by millions of years of survival pressure, individualized by genetic variation that stretches back through your specific lineage, and then shaped further by everything you've ever eaten, every kitchen you've ever been in, every culture that handed you a plate and told you this was food. What feels like preference is actually a readout of your entire history, biological and personal, compressed into a single sensory moment. So the next time a food triggers something strong in you, something that other people around you genuinely don't seem to notice or feel, pay attention to that. Not as a quirk, not as a flaw, but as a signal. Your sensory dislikes are not arbitrary. They are data. They are the residue of an ancient chemical detection system that has been tuning itself, population by population, generation by generation, right up to the version of it you're running today. What does your version detect? What signals does your body amplify that the person next to you doesn't even register? That's evolutionary biology, living in real time inside your nose.